I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews with Michael Luckhoo, co-founder of Cirus, back to talk about wallets, AI, blockchain, the merging of AI and blockchain, and how can we create synergies between these two industries, revenue generating opportunities, and keep up with the insane demand that AI is asking for this year and over the next few years. So thank you so much for taking the time, Michael.
Thanks, Ashton. Good to be back here.
Likewise, it's been a few times that Cirus has come on and the platform continues to grow. I'd love to hear a little bit about the latest on what you and your team are building at Cirus, and then we can dive into all those topics.
Definitely, yeah. It's been a wild ride, to say the least. We started Cirrus with the concept that data is monetary value. It's the currency of the internet. And at that time, 2021, it was a new topic. People were a little bit afraid of it. Where is this data going? Why, how is it being used? And we had to do a lot of convincing to say that this data has actually been used in large parts of building these platforms and advertising companies and so forth. Fast forward to today, I think people are realizing that this data has actually given rise to some superintelligence, which is AI. And over that past 8 years, this has been happening behind the scenes. It's been scraping public data from every source on the internet. And now we have this beautiful thing called AI, but people were really the makeup in creating it. And that's what's interesting now. I think the topic has become easier because people are making more relevance around what data actually gave power to. So with Cirrus, we've become a little bit more relevant than previously because now we can kind of say, well, look at the products that are being built around AI based on your data. How do we now transform you to be part of that process, and what can we do next? So that's kind of the long and short of where we are, but it's been a whirlwind to say the least.
I love that. And I think a lot of people understood that data is important, but taking data and turning it into information or things that can be used, that's where AI really comes in handy. And I think that was the missing key, that maybe in 2021, people didn't realize the full potential of how data can be transformed to be used so efficiently. And you guys have been starting as a blockchain-based project, but focusing on data. Now that's emerging into, okay, AI is the one that's using this data for many, many different purposes. I want to start off this part with a question on why do you think AI needs blockchain, or where is that synergy between the two industries?
That's a great point. I think the concept of where AI right now is there's a few things that are hard to find. Let's just say, just in the traditional AI side, we know that there is going to be a shortage of compute. If and when that happens, there's definitely a supply chain issue. We know that compute is in high demand, even though they're making the models a bit smarter and a little bit more easier to distill. And what we do know is that layered with that, there's two elements. There's compute and there's data. Data is being harder to find. So they're trying to unlock new types of data, especially from offline, autonomous driving, physical robots, understanding layouts for factories and understanding what that data looks like, because a lot of the public information from the internet has been already scraped. So how do they unlock the next version of data? Where can they find that? So those two components are pretty critical. The great part is, in the world of blockchain and decentralization, those two commodities live and they're abundant. So we do have compute around the world, whether it's the laptops we're on right now, or GPUs like an RTX 4090 or whatever gamer is using at that point in time. And the interesting part is, just like a peer-to-peer system, those resources can come to use into this global platform where you and I can share those resources. So if you're a model builder, you're a creator in some form of AI, you can ask the network or ask me to say, can you provide GPU compute or rendering services like some of the platforms you see now? And we can share that resource. So instead of you going to AWS or GCP, there's a abundant resources as long as we can tie that in. So blockchain is a mechanism to broadcast, to find those resources, to record where it's being allocated, and to share the value layer between the two, which is the crypto economic layer. So there's a lot there that we can really tap into that the world hasn't really seen yet.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people understand that there is a high demand, and it's probably going to be there's an even higher demand as the AI gets bigger and requires more processing to process all of the information in the world. Do you think that with blockchain, mobile phones, laptops, graphics cards on your gaming computer in the corner of the room, is that computing power enough, or a decent chunk that will allow people to get involved with computing and AI and sort of getting a little piece of that pie that AWS and GCP have?
Yeah, that's a big topic because what we've traditionally seen, these big models, these large language models had to be built on very advanced computers like H100s. You've seen Elon Musk build a factory of these 100,000 H100s. Those are hard to come by. Those are not easy GPUs to purchase for the average person. That's specifically used for model training. So model training is heavy on compute resources, and you need low latency. So you need superclusters that all come together in unison to basically train these models. What we've seen though, that these large language models are becoming more efficient and they're becoming smaller in parameter size. So from 400 billion down to like 1 billion, 2 billion. So a lot of those smaller models can actually live on device, on edge, essentially being able to perform some of those compute processes right from your phone or from your laptop. So we're finding that the energy required to actually not just train, but to actually perform inference is becoming much more efficient. So we're now starting to see new compute hardware come out that's less costly. I think NVIDIA just launched one. I forgot the exact name, and they're being able to be more consumer friendly. So you can actually store a large language model directly on your device. Wow. That's interesting because not only I can use it, but I can share that with you, so you can access it when I'm not, in use. So that the concept around compute and GPU resources are becoming more ubiquitous, I would say. And in regards to not just training, but inference for like structured data and so forth, we don't necessarily have to work in unison as long as we're providing pieces of that data back to the original repo. We can do it asynchronous. That's kind of the word. So long and short, it is becoming much more efficient, and the usage of our compute can be a part of that system as well.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. And I want to dive into that part more about the data side, structuring. So say, for example, we do set up a blockchain network and we want to contribute to growing this AI monster. What exactly are we doing with our machines interacting with using the data to interact?
Yeah, so we think that, the two big parts for the AI, it's the training. It's also how you provide and serve that model, that's inference, and how you provide reinforced human learning feedback. So the idea is like, once it's been done, how do we provide better feedback to the system? How does a human now provide some level of intervention? And we think in those three parts, we can serve different areas specifically. Like I touched on, the training side is difficult. It's not something that's as efficient. We've seen a couple examples of that distributed training in our system. I think like Prime Intellect and Noose that have done it at a very small scale. There's a long way to go there. But we think that inference is especially, we can use some of our power to like ask the GPU or ask the AI, hey, I have this piece of data. I need to be structured and annotated and labeled in a certain way. Instead of me having the tools like the ETL, traditionally data, you would have to have extract, transform, and load tools. Instead of me having all that, I can basically place the request with AI. They can format it specifically how I want it and then send it back to the main repo. So we're now, instead of the user having to have all these different specific tools and being part and commit these resources, as long as I can call on that AI to help, pass that information through, it's much more achievable. It's what we call structuring. So that's one part. We can become, a subsidiary, I think, of sending data, making that data more real time. Another component's called RAG. The idea is you can make this data much more efficient, much more real time, sending that reinforced learning. And once that model is built, people can look at that and annotate and label that data. And labeling, very, very simply put, is just human intervention, human eyes looking at that piece of information saying, yes, this is accurate. No, it's not. It can be an image. It can be a piece of, written text. It doesn't matter as long as that is being done. And that's a very high demand sector right now. So yeah, there's a lot of ways we can play into it.
It's really interesting. And so there's two parts there. There's being able to tap in and have your bandwidth and, your processing power in more of a passive kind of way, where like you don't really have to do anything. You can connect your device and you don't have to be working 8 hours a day to be able to contribute. And then there's the labeling and structuring where you actually have to do more active work, but the rewards could be greater in that.
Yeah, exactly that. When you're not using your computer, we call this sort of like system standby, right? It's latent compute. It's really interesting. There's actually, this has been done before in traditional science. There was open source work by Berkeley University, for example, a project called BOINC. And it was just people as volunteers plugging their computers at home, their desktops at home, and providing standby or latent compute to these research facilities. And all the research facilities would do you would download a Docker image to your desktop, and then you would connect to their network, and they would ask you for specific tasks, like your computer would fold protein. It would look at telegraphic imagery, and then provide a labeling to that data set and send it back. And the best, it would actually take an aggregate of different types of data sets and see what was the most accurate. So folding protein and these things have been traditionally done. It's really interesting because this is what's coming back into our space. I'm sure we'll talk about this category called decentralized science. Mm-hmm. So we're able to do that passively now and actually earn a crypto reward from that. But yeah, exactly what you said. We can supply that information. The labeling side is a little bit more human intervention, so it should technically equate to more value. Traditionally, labelers that are built doing this overseas, they make anywhere from $1 to $6 per hour on providing that information. Scale AI is a great comparison. They make $760 million in revenue a year just from labeling services for AI. So it's a great comparison. But we do definitely see there's multiple areas people can be part of the data system at this point.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting about the science part. I do recall that way back in the day. I think it was so novel that people realized their computers could contribute to something passively, that they're just doing it, but there was no reward, essentially, except besides the goodness of your heart that you're helping science. But I have seen this notion of decentralized science, or DeSci, in the last year through the crypto industry. I don't think it's really taken shape. Maybe AI could play a big role in that, but I've heard the term thrown around, but there is no really big names that are actually helping to do this. And I feel like the missing key is that crypto rewards or blockchain integration, where people can contribute either passively or be actually getting something for it. Because nowadays people are so busy. At least if you're doing it passively, you can earn while you're sleeping. Or if you're doing it actively, it's something that you need to be rewarded for nowadays.
Totally. I think DAO it's definitely an emerging sector in our field. Decentralized science, I think there's a company called Bio Protocol that's just launched. What they're typically doing right now in DeSci is just setting up a DAO, so anybody can contribute to that DAO. If they use those funds for major research and there's a win inside of that research, they would pay back the recipients of the DAO a reward, and you'd be a contributor and you would get some type of profit. I think that's step one, but I think step two would, like we said, is providing the latent compute and the compute resources that these science companies may actually need, and pass back some of that income stream or that revenue to the user. So we can supply data that is novel. We can perform work like folding proteins, and we can also even supply funding to these DAOs as well. So the user can be part of that entire ecosystem for decentralized science. I think that's fantastic. I think it's more practical use of how the world of decentralization is coming to use for a better good. So I find it super interesting.
Definitely. And the notion of DAOs taking over companies and being decentralized autonomous organizations in themselves has been around for a few years, but I feel like there's so many moving parts that it's hard for people to know where to start or where to focus on. And I feel like smaller specific tasks like this or small initiatives are a great way to start figuring out how exactly this will work in a decentralized manner and how the governance works on it. How do you see people actually, without having to understand all the technical jargon and barriers to entry, can people go through just their browser or Chrome extension to start getting involved in a data DAO or something that's a DAO but contributing to DeSci or AI?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you made. I think typically speaking, DAOs have not taken off. They haven't really been truly adopted. I think a large part of that was this idea that there was governance, there was a voting mechanism, there was a snapshot, and hopefully you provided some change to this protocol. Most of those votes would go back to management, and management would say, okay, yeah, we can do this or not. And like nothing really happened or whatever the case is. Where we think a DAO stands to really take off is that it's truly automated. So if you think about a data DAO, very simply put, let's just think of it as a Google folder. It's a folder where let's say 100 gigabytes and you're submitting data to this folder. And if I submitted a 1 gigabyte, I own 1% of this folder. I own 1% of this DAO essentially. And every time that DAO is being interrogated, whether it's someone using it for research, whether it's somebody building a new model, whether it's supplying some form of chain to another system or basically needs more relevant data, we can see that. There's a record and receipt. So that DAO, all that DAO is really doing, that Google Drive, is making that return on that data more sustainable. So it's not one-time use. It's a renewable resource. So every time that folder is being accessed, there's an access of payment. We're basically saying that the recipients who own a percentage of that can get paid. And so it becomes, so the interesting part about data and these assets is that it is actually not just one-time use, it's renewable. So we can share that down into multiple different areas and say, hey, do you want to access this? I'm sure it's the point. So I think this is more sustainable ways that DAOs can be actually integrated and we can adopt it in a much better way. But typically speaking, people wouldn't have to do that much as long as you're connected to the system. Like with Cirus, we want to take that friction off of the user. We want to actually plug into these DAOs, plug into these systems. So anytime information is being done, the user can be hands off. They can just they know exactly what project they're supporting, what network they're part of, and it's more hands free. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to dive into that, the sort of the original vision of the Cirus wallet, and then how AI is fitting into that. Because from what I understand in our previous conversations, there's thousands and thousands of people that have just using the Cirus Chrome extension. So you really just download the extension quick and you have a wallet, and then you're earning from the data that's there, but you're not giving up your personal information per se, and it's all passively done. But it wasn't towards, it was before, OpenAI was even around, and it wasn't for LLM machines. So how is this evolving into contributing into AI more?
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, like the first part was, how do we provide insights? How do we gain that piece of data, make sure that we can be responsible and utilize and monetize on a traditional data market and people get paid. So the first key component with Cirus was insights, right? So we understand browsing traffic, history of people, like building that data set essentially. The second and third part is what we're moving into this year, is having the user more integrally involved. So when you're sharing information, you have to be online, you have to be surfing the web. That might be 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours a day. But what can you do after those hours? So entirety, the 24 hours, you're earning something. So the second component I think we touched on was structuring. So that's simply having your computer connected to the system. We'll send you a piece of data, a micro piece of data. You can structure it, annotate, label it just from the use of your computer because it's set up with an AI call. It passes that information through. So now we have one giant data set that we can present. That might be for a third party project. For example, right now we have a automotive logistics company that's basically taking a lot of traffic data and imagery from the car, and they need that data structured because it's really raw, and that needs compute power to structure. So we can basically say, okay, well, here's our user base. It's a decentralized network that is providing latent compute. On average right now, that would be, anywhere from 8 to 10 cents per hour. So in the equation of our system, we have a couple $100,000 worth of compute at any given point in time. So that's step number 2. That's what we're really focused on testing right now. Step number 3 would be looking at the labeling components. And all that would happen is that a user would see in their wallet, there's a notification, here's an image, or here's something on a dashboard to go and check. You're almost like a QA service to what the data, to structuring the data, and you're saying, okay, this makes sense. Here's the image, here's how I've labeled it. And that's another form of revenue. The user can be involved in any 3 of those points or just one. We want to be more comprehensive so we can at least offer all of these different tools with Cirus so that you don't have to go anywhere else. And the great part is the wallet would be able to directly receive and earn that income directly to that wallet. So you don't have to change that or move somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. To have the wallet in there, and from what I see, you can have different coins, different chains. Is there a, in terms of how that would go in contributing and then receiving, do those funds actually come from, for example, that automotive company, or where's the money being generated from for the revenue, for the power that you're giving to the AI?
Yeah. Well, now the partnerships that we're looking at right now, I think this year is for Cirrus, we really need to focus on meaningful partnerships that we can become a part of that supply chain of that data system, whether it's structuring, pre-processing, labeling. Most of these projects right now that we're speaking to already have their own form of token. That's how they're monetizing. That's how they're giving back to the users. So, we can actually embed that new token into our wallet so that the reward correctly comes from that existing project, whether it's a DAO like Vanna or whatever project we may work with. They can see that signature token from that project. When we step outside of the box of crypto, then we'll look at direct revenue with projects that are like traditional companies are saying, hey, we have this piece of data that needs to be labeled. This is direct fiat involvement, and we can look at that. We haven't explored that directly yet, but we know that there's a lot of overflow and demand for labeling. A close company that I know is called Sapien. They're getting requests pretty much by the day from traditional companies. So I think Sapien would be a really good, interesting project for us to communicate with, because we can at least support some level of labeling outside of the norm that they get. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, because I think this is so much bigger than crypto. Crypto's continuing to grow dramatically, but OpenAI had a few million users in the first day. It was the fastest growing startup from day one, and I think people are still figuring out where that information is just coming from magically when they ask a question. And if they can tap into those revenue generating opportunities, and if they're not in crypto yet, fiat rewards are great, but being able to tie that into a wallet where they can see fiat rewards and then other stable coins and other crypto, and hey, I can contribute to this new company and they already have a token and I'm earning that, and I'm getting in at the beginning. Maybe it's the next OpenAI or something like that. So I think that the reward potential is there. And it's very exciting. And I actually haven't heard of this before at all, where it's like my crypto wallet. Traditionally people have been earning rewards through staking their assets, and they're earning a few percent. So like, yeah, I earn from my crypto wallet, but I've never heard of a crypto wallet that is contributing to AI and earning from that. So it's like my crypto wallet's helping AI grow. Is like, that sounds like the next level and logical step for most crypto wallets.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ashton. And this is going to be really interesting, because I think there's going to be a world in the next X amount of years that there might actually be a frontier model or a big large language model that is actually built from the participation of people. And that hasn't been done yet. That's the amazing part. There's 4 or 5 top LLMs. To be an LLM provider right now, the stakes are massive. You have to have $1 billion to probably entry into compute and to find the new data unlock. So I think it's going to be such a fun next few years to see how does the community get involved. A quick example is a project I studied. It's called Poolside, and they know that they don't have the compute to compare to XAI or Claude and so forth. They've got $500 million, which seems like a lot, but they know they don't have enough. So they're finding new data unlocks like from code bases of like repos on GitHub to say maybe that code actually gives them a key insight to get to AGI quicker. And so they're basically trying to find and scrape code bases, specifically not data or text or imagery, just really focusing on code. And I think that's quite interesting. So what if, the users can say, hey, I've got these private repos in this code base or whatever, and we want to constrive that to that frontier model. In response, I can get a form of income from that large language model taking off. I think that's really interesting. And I think that at least there's an outcome that's alternative to traditional ways that frontier models are being built. We just need to get the word out there. I think that decentralized world has been hidden a little bit. And the more we talk about it, do things like this, we can at least get that, that awareness out there. Yeah.
Definitely. I love what you and the team are doing. I hope we can get some more decentralized LLM models, or at least more options that people can choose from. And as they continue to grow, there will probably be more small language models or things where if people want to specifically focus on their life's work in one specific industry, there's going to be even more information that these LLM companies are looking to tap into new information to grow. There's so much information that hasn't yet got into the LLMs yet. So I think there's definitely room there. And now with the Cirus wallet, I know it's live right now, but these different AI iterations and new revenue generating opportunities are coming in. So is there a timeline for that, or how can people follow along, start earning, and then as these new revenue opportunities come in, get involved with them?
Yeah, we actually spent most of last year taking the deep dive in AI, a lot behind the scenes before we actually produced a product. We wanted to try it for ourselves, find the way we could actually even build a network that can do these functions. And we did a lot of that heavy lifting last year. We didn't come out with the product underneath the hood. We just wanted to make sure we knew what was right, how this model was built, like all those things. It was a huge learning experience. Going forward into this year, we want to come out with some of these functions we've already previously built, and we want to tie it into the product. It's been a longer, slower process. I know a lot of people are kind of frustrated sometimes of our length of time to get a product out there. But we really want to make it beautiful. We want to make sure that it's an easy, seamless experience and it ties in with everything we're doing. So from a timeline perspective, the first thing is we're going to be testing traditional structuring models with an existing project to see what kind of feedback we can get, how the system looks from a distributed level, like where does everything kind of cohesively put together within the next few months. And then we want to build out like a back-end dashboard so people can on Quickfire open their wallet, see an expanded dashboard and see all of the data points that are being committed into the system, all the compute that's being supplied, how much we are enabling as a network. To touch on that, right now we're getting 2.4 million impressions per day from the users. And we think these are valuable points. Unfortunately, our users don't even know how much they're actually sharing, but we want to bring that to the forefront. That's our real core focus. Once we can do that, then we can take the next steps and say, here's other opportunities of how you can get involved. And you can literally toggle on, toggle off which ones you want. The wallet will signal new events. It won't just be a red orb, maybe a green or blue, but you can see what your wallet is actually doing at that given point in time. And then the last part, in the middle to the later part of the year, we'll at least test and look at labeling and see where we can draw on from that. So, long and short, we've been building a lot. I think in the next few months, we'll be able to test and roll some of these products and at least get some functions out there. And, I wish I could say more, but it's been a slow progress, but we definitely are heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you've said a lot. I learned a lot about, there's a lot to know about AI and different ways that it gathers information, transforms information, and how we can earn from that, and the potential opportunities, and how blockchain does play a role. I'm excited to see those next steps for the Cirus wallet and the revenue generation opportunities, passive and active. I'll be following along. I can leave a link in the show notes to the Cirus wallet extension and the Cirus website and the X and the other socials if people want to learn more as well. Wishing you and your team all the best, Michael, on getting these advancements out, and let's contribute to AI and put it in the right direction. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Ashton. This was awesome.